Good morning, I am Professor Lambeau, and this is going to be a brief history on marijuana in the United States. So the current status of marijuana as of April 30th, 2023, date of recording this video. Marijuana is still federally illegal. The federal government just ignores the cases of states declaring marijuana legal. They just kind of don't enforce the federal illegalization of it. So it's still illegal, just the government just chooses not to do anything about it. This isn't the only case of that happening. For example, prostitution is still illegal federally, but Nevada state law says that counties with less than 700,000 people can have legal brothels. So it's not the only time that the federal government just doesn't do anything about the law. And then recreational marijuana is legal by the states in 22 states, and then medical marijuana is legal in 38 states. An October 2022 study from Monmouth University in New Jersey found that 68% of Americans support legalizing the possession of small amounts of marijuana for personal use. And then 26 opposed, and then 6% did not know. So actually, the majority of Americans, the large majority, actually support marijuana legalization. History of marijuana legalization in the United States. As we all know, marijuana laws are often just stand-ins to excuse racism. Before the 1940s, marijuana was commonly referred to as Indian hemp. And then in addition, throughout the 20th and the 21st century, marijuana has just been a stand-in to be racist against African Americans. Up until the 1930s, marijuana was fairly confined to the Southwest near the U.S. and Mexican border, but it did make its way all the way to New York. So it was other places. Local laws in New York were first published in 1860, and then in the 1910s and 20s, a few other cities and then states passed laws about marijuana, just kind of regulating it. Overall, few laws or regulations were that concerned about marijuana. There wasn't a whole lot to do with it. And it's important to note here as well that legalization and decriminalization are different. Legalization basically means you can, I won't say you can have as much as you want, but you can do it almost freely. And decriminalization means you'll get a fine, and it's still pretty frowned upon. So Harry Anslinger is the big name in marijuana illegalization. He was the man behind the war on drugs before there even was a war on drugs. Harry Anslinger was born in 1892, and from ages 35 to 46, he worked for various military and police organizations on stopping international drug trafficking. So Harry actually traveled to Germany, Venezuela, Japan, and a few other countries, and he helped kind of start up their anti-drug protocols and help stop drugs coming into the United States. In 1930, Anslinger was appointed the founding commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which is brand new, so he's the first one. And then the Bureau of Narcotics fell under the U.S. Treasury because the government saw marijuana illegalization and sales as a loss of revenue. So they're losing taxes, and they didn't see it as actually wrong. They just wanted the money from it. Then Anslinger immediately began collecting evidence of marijuana causing crimes and violence and refused any interpretation of events that said otherwise. So let's say in a situation someone was drunk and high and they're driving a car and crashed it. Anslinger would just say, oh, they were high and that's what caused them to crash the car. It's also important to note that Anslinger's peers referred to him as extremely racist in the 1920s. So I can't really imagine how racist you have to be for people in 1920 United States to call you extremely racist. So like I said, none of the actual evidence that Harry looked at had anything to do with marijuana, and he would ignore a lot of evidence that pointed otherwise, and he would just make up whatever he wanted. So Harry looked at over 2,000 criminal convictions and said that they're all connected to marijuana, but in reality, 0 of them were connected to marijuana at all. Some of them might have had marijuana in their system or near them, but it wasn't actually like marijuana causing the issue. 30 pharmacists from the American Medical Association sent Harry a letter telling him that his proposed ban on marijuana was wrong and that he didn't know what he was talking about, and he ignored 29 of them. But then the one who agreed with Anslinger, um, he said, "Yeah, that one's right, and I'm going to believe him." And those comments were left in bureau files. Harry Anslinger also used mass media to create marijuana propaganda, which led to hysteria. Then he often used racism to further his case. So you can see those two pieces of propaganda there on the right. And then this also began Reefer Madness, the movie. I believe this whole thing's available on YouTube. It's very long and very boring. But basically, it's just a movie that says people that get high on marijuana will start being violent and killing people and jumping out of windows, basically just going insane. Many believe Anslinger also began the war on drugs because the Federal Bureau of Narcotics had nothing to do when Prohibition ended in 1933. So we know that Anslinger started the anti-marijuana kind of movement in 1930. And then Prohibition ends in 33, and then just a few years later, marijuana is legally banned. So many speculate that since the Bureau of Narcotics was almost defunct since Prohibition ended, Anslinger really needed something to keep his job, and that's why he picked marijuana. So marijuana, like I said, was made federally illegal in 1937. So after Anslinger, Anslinger held office until 1962, and then he died in 1975. Marijuana continued to be a popular drug, even with Anslinger doing his job, or even after his death. But it was mostly popular with, you could say, I guess, lower classes or hippies or the poor. And then the polar opposite, like celebrities, rock stars, actors and actresses, they're all big on marijuana as well. So this began the push for anti-drug campaigns in the United States. DARE, the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program, was founded in 1983 in a joint effort from Los Angeles Police and the Los Angeles School District. And then the Your Brain on Drugs campaign was launched in 1987. You can see one of their ads here. This was pretty huge from, well, really the 80s up until the 2000s. And many children's and family TV shows had anti-drug episodes, such as Full House, Saved by the Bell, a few other cartoons all had anti-drug episodes. It's important to note the last three I mentioned, though. Those were kind of all focused on all drugs, like cocaine, heroin, LSD. They didn't really focus on, like, I guess you could say, more mild drugs or harder drugs. They just said drugs, and they didn't focus on marijuana specifically. On the other hand, Above the Truth, which is funded by the Office of National Drug Control Policy, made advertisements like these two on the right. And if you watch cable in the United States in the early 2000s, I'm sure you remember these. The one on top says the girl in the background is like flat and boring because she smokes marijuana. And the one on the bottom, a kid comes home high, and his dog starts talking to him, and the dog says he's sad because the kid smokes weed. So marijuana kind of, I guess you could say, propaganda or the stigma towards it was still very, very widespread. It still is today, but it is a lot better. But very widespread up until the 21st century. So today, marijuana legalization has made no significant impact to violent crime rates. They're not up or down, but even in the states where it's legal, like, there's no real change. At the same time, at any given time, even though it's legal in many, many states, more than 40,000 people are incarcerated for cannabis. In addition, African Americans are 3.73 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than whites, but both use marijuana at roughly the same rates. That's statistics from the American Civil Liberties Union, so you can check that out. And then marijuana suspicion is often used as an excuse to harass Americans, particularly black Americans. So if a police sees a lighter or rolling papers or something in a car, they can be like, "I think you're high," and then they'll start to try to arrest you and stuff like that. Religious organizations continue to stall efforts to legalize or decriminalize marijuana. As you can see in this picture, the states where the biggest gap is of no recreational marijuana is all the South. But like I said, things are getting better. And what we can do is we can vote people in that support marijuana legalization. And we can voice our beliefs online and in our communities. We can stop marijuana disinformation whenever we see it. And then we can support marijuana causes large and small. I've seen people say that medical marijuana isn't enough and that they shouldn't even pass those bills, so that's just not the case. Any step forward is a step in the right direction. So if we have to legalize medical marijuana before we can get recreational, that's what we should do. In any case, I am Professor Lambeau on YouTube. If you like this video, if you can please like and subscribe. Thank you for listening.